And the challenge that we face in providing accounting services is that it's where the complicated meets the complex. Running an accounting business is always going to be hard because it's where the complicated meets the complex, and they are two distinctly different things. And if you don't know which is which or the approach to take for each one, it's always going to be a huge source of frustrations for you and for your clients as well. What I want to do in this short video is help you to unravel the difference between what's complicated and what's complex, to understand the approach you have to take to solve or attempt to solve each of them. I'm also going to give you 6 quick tactics to help you to manage the complexity better as you move into 2020. So hopefully it's going to be a less frustrating year and hopefully a less frustrating decade than perhaps the last one was, because it's the complexity that causes all of our challenges, because we never get told about it and it goes against fundamental accountant thinking. So let me start by explaining the difference between something that's complicated and something that's complex. And I took this from Aaron Dignan's Brave New Work, fantastic book, highly recommended. So the first thing we have is something that is complicated. And a good example of this is a car engine. Something that's complicated can be understood, we can write instructions for it, we can learn about it, it might take us time to learn about it, but eventually we can dissect it, we can write rule books for it, and fundamentally we can control it. That's the key aspect of something that's complicated. Something that's complex, on the other hand, is quite different. Something that's complex can't be controlled. Something that's complex can only be managed. A good example of this, if complicated is a car engine, then complex is traffic. And the reason why it's complex is because you have different drivers of different abilities, driving different cars, going in different directions, with different focuses. Some are distracted, some are on the phones, some want to get there quickly. All manner of complexity surround that, which makes it a very difficult situation. And like I say, you can't control it like you can control something that's complicated. All we can ever do is do our very best to manage it. If we apply this to accounting services, what's complicated are the services that we provide, because they're difficult, they take time to learn, but fundamentally we can put processes in place to control them, we can get the right technology, we can train our team, we can go on courses, we can get degrees, and fundamentally, as hard as it is, I'm not saying this is easy, as hard as it is, we can eventually control our services even though they are complicated. However, what's complex are the businesses that we serve, because businesses by their nature are complex. Again, you have different business owners with different agendas, different levels of experience, different operating systems, different size businesses, different markets, different frustrations that appear. These are people, they're not processes and systems. So just by the very fact they're people, you're going to get added complexity there. And the challenge that we face in providing accounting services is that it's where the complicated meets the complex. It's this interaction here where these two entities meet that causes a lot of frustrations if we don't attempt to manage the complexity. And managing the complexity will always be difficult. It will always be a challenge, and it doesn't sit with accounting thinking. The reason why we tend to go to this part and try and solve this is because it's what we're trained in, it's what our degree's in, it's what we're qualified in, but also there's an answer to it. We can get to the end of it. Just like you accountants and bookkeepers, you know, if there's like an extra penny over or an extra pound over when you try and balance some books, it's going to cause you sleepless nights until you get all of those numbers nicely rounded and balanced out, etc. That's why we naturally veer towards this. You're never going to get that with managing business owners. You are going to have things hanging over. You are going to have things that are unresolved. And that's why it's a much messier, more difficult process, and why we don't tend to handle it very well. So what normally happens is you'll start working with a client and there'll be some challenge there. So let's say, for example, you have some bookkeeping processes that you're trying to implement into a business, and you want this business to provide you with all the receipts and expenses via Receipt Bank by a certain day in a month. And what happens is you don't get it, or you get some bits by Receipt Bank and some bits via email, and some bits on the date you wanted it and some bits ages later, weeks later. And that's when we start to get these frustrations. So how do we handle it? How do we start to manage this complexity? What we tend to do is we tend to ping an email over saying, hey, I asked you for it in this format, you've sent it over this, like this, we can't do that, we can't carry on like this, so we're gonna have to change it. And so we have these email exchanges and we think that's gonna control the client. You can't control the client, we can only manage them. And I'm always interested in the origins of words. And what manage actually means is to control a horse. It means that the original meaning of manage means to tame a horse. So if you think you can tame a horse via a few emails, you're very much mistaken. This is a very hands-on process. Man comes from the word hand. It's a hands-on process. We've got to get involved, we've got to get dirty, and we've got to know that we're never going to fully control it. We can just do our very best to manage it. You can't do that via email. So what tends to happen over the course of the relationship, you ping a few emails, the client doesn't get tamed, they don't do what you want them to do. You continue to control the processes. Next month or next quarter, you attempt to do the same thing again. You get similar frustrations. This goes backwards and forwards until eventually something happens, something breaks. Either they just don't give you the information that you need to be able to file some tax return on time, or someone gets fined, or some mistake gets made. And then all of a sudden, that's when we have a collision between these two entities, and that's when people can start to fall out. It's also when accountancy firms start to say, well, they were a bad client anyway. They never do things as we want them to do. They're always late. They never send it through in the format that we ask for it. They never listen to what we asked them for. I've sent them 50 emails and they've not replied to a single one or whatever. And then we get rid of that client as a bad client, and we try to replace them with another client where we're going to attempt to do the same thing, only to create the same problem. And it's because we're focusing in all our time and all of our effort on controlling the complicated aspect, but what we're not doing is getting into managing this complexity. What I would love to encourage you to do this year, this decade, is to have a much greater focus on managing the complexity. It's going to be hard, it's going to be some difficult conversations, it's going to be a retraining, it's going to be a different skill set, but unless we can start to manage this complexity, these touch points and these intersections and interactions are always going to be a source of huge frustrations for you and for the client as well, and you're constantly going to be churning through what you perceive to be bad clients, but they're not. They're just not properly managed clients. You're getting rid of wild horses because they're still wild, running around all over the place, because you've not got your hands on and you've not taken control and started to manage them properly. Now, this is a huge topic to attempt to solve in this short video here, but the thing I really wanted to get over to you was just this interesting idea of complicated and complexity, and just trying to give you some insights into perhaps some of those frustrations that you're feeling or that your clients are expressing as well, and to give you an indication as to what the source of some of that frustration is. Now, I'm going to struggle to attempt to give you the solution for this because it's a long-term investment that's going to be required into attempting to manage this. I'm going to put some courses on later on in the year, some live events, some online courses to help you with this. But right now, I'm just going to give you 6 quick tactics to help you to at least start thinking the right way about this. The first is you've got to manage the value exchange between you. So this is where you're agreeing exactly what services this client is getting and what fees they're paying as well. If you can't manage that part, you've got no chance of managing this. That was why GoProposal was invented, because it gives you such granularity about the exact aspects of the services that they're getting in great detail. You've got as much sophistication as you need around that, around how you control exactly what they're getting, but also around the pricing as well. There's not a more sophisticated system on the planet, and that was why we designed it to help us in our firm to manage this complexity. So that's the first thing. You've got to manage that value exchange system. The second thing is you've got to review early. So early on in the relationship, it doesn't matter what was agreed early on, you've no idea what you're getting into at the start. And so what we always do is a full review after 3 months, so you can say, hey guys, look, this is what we agreed, but this is not working for these reasons. So review early and then review often, every quarter, in my opinion. Next, map out the processes. This is complicated what you provide to your clients, but what you've got to do is give them insight into what is complicated. So have you mapped out all of your services? Have you shown them how they interact with you, what those touch points are, and what happens if they don't do what you want them to do, when you want them to do it, in the way that you want it done? This needs to be fully and clearly communicated to your client if you're going to have any chance of managing this complexity, and certainly with the interaction points between the complicated service that you provide. Next, you've got to set the standards. There's no point in saying to the client, you need to improve your bookkeeping or you need to upload things on time next month. You need to explain exactly what that means. If you want them to improve their bookkeeping, you have to say exactly what that means, what technology, by what dates, 100% of receipts, 100% of expenses, invoices, whatever it is that you want. You have to explain it very clearly so that you can go back to them next quarter or next month and say, look, you've not done this. You've not done this part, or you've done well here, or you've fallen short with this. You need to manage that. There's no point in saying, look, you need to be better next month. Because if they submit one extra receipt next month, they're better than they were this month. And that is not actually what you mean. So you really need to set the standards by which they need to adhere to. And if they can't achieve that standard, then they need to look at ways that you can help them achieve that standard. The next is you've got to be firm. You can't control a wild horse from a distance by being friendly and by being nice. You've got to get in amongst it. You've got to get hold of it. You can't do this via email. You've got to do this live, sat in front of that person or on a Zoom call or whatever, but you've got to have a real conversation with them. And it might be a difficult conversation, but you've got to be firm. You've got to lay out your rules of the game and how you want this to work and what will happen if it doesn't work in that way. This is where being firm is being kind to that client, because they don't want to be wild. They want to be tamed, because by being tamed, they can take control of the finance function of their business. And that's why it's in everybody's interest that we're able to achieve this. And finally, if they're not able to fulfill the standard that you need them to, maybe there's an opportunity here for you to upserve them, for you to say, hey, look, you're just not generating the invoices in the way that we need you to. Would you like us to do that for you? Or you're really struggling to get those debts in and that's causing us a real problem when we're trying to reconcile your accounts. Would you like us to chase those debts for you? Or would you like us to upload your receipts for you, or whatever that might be? But there may be an opportunity here to upserve them. So some of those bad clients for you that you want to get rid of, maybe going to another accounting firm and paying 5 times more and not being a bad client for that other accounting firm, because they're being served to the right level, because that accounting firm is attempting to manage that complexity and is charging that client more for it. And I guarantee they will appreciate and thank them for managing that complexity, even if they have to pay for it. So I just wanted this to be a short video, and I know it's not been, but I think it's a very interesting and strong concept for us to get our heads around, the fact that our services are complicated, our clients are complex. We can control the complicated, but we can only ever manage the complexity. We put so much effort into this in our training, in our systemization, in our checklist that we produce, but we put very little effort into learning the required skills to go and actually manage our clients, to sit with them, to have difficult conversations. And a lot of this is to do with mindset and becoming fearful of having that conversation and what's going to happen if we do. But for me, this is where we're going to be winning moving forward. We've got all this great technology, in the accounting industry, but life doesn't feel any easier than it was 5-10 years ago. And the reason I believe is because it doesn't matter what technology you bring in, managing the complexity, managing clients is always and will always be a hands-on experience. And that's the real skill, that's the real art. This is the science which naturally fits in with accountant logical thinking, but this is the art that doesn't, that we really need to invest time in learning how to do this. I hope that's been useful. A few tactics there for you to apply. I hope 2020 is fantastic for you, and I hope that this decade brings you everything you want and deserve.